So we've covered the architecture, the composure, and the etiquette. Now we have to talk about the actual words that come out of your mouth when you're standing face to face with a high-value peer or a senior leader. Now, for deep-thinking analytical minds, conversation can at times feel more like a data transfer. You want to be accurate, you want to be thorough, and you want to get to the point. But know that high-level social success is about your vibe and the value you bring. If you only provide the data, you're a Wikipedia page. If you only provide the vibe, then they may not take you seriously. You need a good balance of interpersonal skills. The biggest struggle for experts is the curse of knowledge. You speak in a dialect of acronyms and Greek letters. When someone asks, "What do you do?" or "How's that project going?" socially underleveraged professionals give a response that's technically perfect but socially boring. Now, to fix this, use the bridge technique. You take a hopefully short journey from the technical island where you are now and build a bridge to the human island where the other person's waiting for you. I'll give you a simple analogy. Find a way to craft your words so they go down more like a nice cold glass of rich chocolate milk rather than a serving of raw kale. The underleveraged way is all jargon, and the bridge way paints a visual picture and an outcome that your colleagues can easily connect to without glazing over from boredom. When you use the bridge method, you don't diminish your expertise by serving up chocolate milk. You made it easy for them to digest your value. This allows the conversation to breathe and gives the other person a handle to grab onto so they can ask a follow-up question. Most people think a good conversation is about being interesting. It's actually about being interested. But as a critical thinker, you can't just ask where you're from or how's the weather, because those are low-level questions. You want to ask insight-driven questions, or in other words, questions that make the other person stop and think. They signal that you're a peer who understands the game. Instead of, "How's your business?" ask, "What's keeping you up at night this quarter?" And instead of, "How do you like your job?" ask, "What's the moment you realized you were going to be successful in this field?" When you ask these, you aren't just making small talk, you're signaling that you operate at a higher frequency. I've seen more social capital burned in the last 30 seconds of a conversation than in the first 3 minutes. Overthinking perfectionists, for one, don't know how to end a conversation, so they let it wither. It's like they're waiting for it to get awkward, and then they make an excuse. But a high-status exit is active and decisive. "James, it was great catching up with you, and I really enjoyed hearing your perspective on the merger. I'm going to go grab a refill, but before I go, who's the one person in the room I should meet?" This exit does 3 things. It validates the conversation you just had. It provides a clear, non-awkward reason for leaving. And it uses James as a higher value gatekeeper, which makes him feel important and gives you a strategic lead. Let's do a system sweep of 5 social micro errors. These are the cracks where your authority leaks out. The first one is uptalk. When your statements sound more like questions, you're asking for permission. Leaders don't ask for permission to be right. Practice speaking in period tones. Your voice should land flat or go slightly down at the end of a sentence. The second one is what I call the just tax. I just wanted to follow up. I'm just an analyst. Just is a word that shrinks your impact, so delete it, particularly from qualifiers. The third micro error is the expert's smirk. This is that half smile you make when you know someone's wrong. It makes you look like a smart aleck instead of a smart leader. Replace it with a neutral, listening face. Next, we have fidgeting. If you're playing with your pen, your ring, your phone, you're telling the room you're uncomfortable. Be a stable asset. Keep your hands calm and within the frame of your body. People will notice subconsciously. The final but not the least important by any means is over-apologizing. If you aren't at fault, don't apologize. It creates a subordinate dynamic. Swap "I'm sorry" for "thank you" instead of Sorry for the long email. Say, thank you for taking the time to read through this in detail. You now have the architecture of presence. You have the SCQA framework to structure your thoughts. You have decisive composure to handle the heat. And you have the etiquette and the conversation skills to move through the elite circles of your industry. But having the tools is only half the battle. Now we have to apply them to the hidden game. Office politics, the high-stakes negotiations, and the art of influencing people who don't report to you. Coming up next are the social rules of the 1% of earners and leaders. If you've made it this far, it means you've accepted that your technical competence is only the baseline. It's the admission fee to the room, but it's not what keeps you there. Now we're moving from internal presence to external mastery. We're going to discuss the protocols of high-end business etiquette, the psychology of the power dinner, and how to navigate the invisible architecture of professional politics. There's a specific set of rules that the top 1% of earners and leaders follow. They don't talk about these rules. They simply observe whether or not you know them. When you miss a social cue at this level, no one pulls you aside to correct you. They simply stop inviting you. They stop considering you for the high-impact projects, and they label you as good at the work but not ready for the stage. We're going to make sure that never happens to you. Etiquette isn't about being nice or polite. In the high-end business context, etiquette is a form of social currency. It signals that you're accustomed to high-value environments. When you walk into a boardroom, a private club, or a partner's office, your first 5 seconds dictate the hierarchy. The first rule is the hierarchy of introduction. Most people wait to be introduced. High-status professionals take the lead. If you're the one hosting or the one with the most context, you facilitate the connections. However, you must respect the seniority of the room. Always introduce the lesser authority to the greater authority. For example, senior partner, I'd like to introduce you to our lead consultant, Sarah. This subtle acknowledgement of the room's structure shows that you understand power dynamics without being submissive. Second rule is the protocol of space. When you enter a meeting room, where you sit matters. The power seat is typically the one with the clearest view of the door and the most central position at the table. If you're a guest, wait for the host to gesture toward a seat. If you're the leader, take the center. Never scrunched up at the corner of the table. Place your materials, your notebook, your tablet with intent, and don't clutter the space. A cluttered desk or a cluttered seat signals a cluttered mind. The business meal is perhaps the most misunderstood tool in the professional toolkit. Most people think they're there to eat lunch or to get to know each other. They're not. The meal's a high-level assessment of your social grace, your patience, and your ability to lead a conversation while managing a complex set of protocols. The first phase is the social buffer. As we discussed earlier, never lead with business. In a high-end setting, jumping straight into the deal makes you appear transactional and like you have something to prove. Instead, focus on high-level rapport. This is where your social calibration dial is at a 5 or a 6. You're looking for shared values, not just shared interest. The second phase is table mechanics. When interacting with waitstaff, never be the person who takes 10 minutes to decide. It signals indecisiveness. Order something that's easy to manage, avoid finger foods and anything that's excessively messy. Your hands and your mouth need to be available for conversation, not tied up with the mechanics of eating. Next is the napkin and the glass. These are the tells of someone who belongs. Your napkin goes on your lap the moment you sit. Your glass is held by the stem, never by the bowl. Why? Because it keeps the drink at the right temperature. And more importantly, it prevents you from looking like you're clutching the glass for comfort. The bill is the most critical moment of the evening. There's no splitting at this level. If you invited the guest, you pay, but not at the table. You either call the restaurant ahead of time and put a card on file, You arrive before the guest and make the arrangements before being seated, or excuse yourself quietly towards the end of the meal to handle it with a host. When you return to the table, the business of the meal is over and you leave with the focus entirely on the relationship building that you just created. Nowadays, your presence isn't just physical, it's digital. And for many of you, the first time a stakeholder meets you will be through a lens. And if your digital presence is low fidelity, your authority is diminished before you even speak. Digital gravitas starts with environmental control. Your background should be clean, intentional, and high value. Lighting should be from the front, never the back. And if you're a silhouette on a screen, you're invisible. But beyond the visuals, it's about your digital communication cadence. The socially underleveraged professional is either too reactive or too silent. They ping people constantly with just checking in messages, which erodes their status, or they take 3 days to respond to an urgent executive request. The high status digital rule is brief, bold, and boundaried. To be brief, use the SCQA framework in your emails. Put the answer in the subject line or the first sentence. To be bold, avoid qualifiers. Instead of "I think we might want to reconsider," use "I recommend we pivot based on X." And to be boundaried, be sure not to respond to non-urgent messages at 10 p.m. It signals that you're at the mercy of your notifications. A leader is in control of their time. By setting boundaries, you actually increase the value of your yes when you do respond. Politics actually is not a dirty word. Politics is simply the study of how people interact and how decisions are made. If you ignore politics, you're essentially trying to play a game of chess while only looking at your own pieces. In every organization, there's the formal chart and the invisible chart. The formal chart is who reports to whom, and the invisible chart is who influences whom. To navigate this, you need to identify the gatekeepers and the amplifiers. The gatekeeper is the person who controls the flow of information or access to a decision maker. This might be an executive assistant, a chief of staff, or a long-tenured senior analyst. If you treat these people as subordinates, you've already lost. High-end social skills dictate that you treat the gatekeeper with the same level of respect and presence as you do the CEO. The amplifier is the person who likes your ideas and has the social capital to repeat them in rooms where you aren't present. To build a network of amplifiers, it's a good idea to practice reciprocal visibility. When you see someone do something well, you mention it to a senior leader. This isn't flattery, it's strategic recognition. When you build someone else's status, they're psychologically primed to build yours. In moments of conflict is where your executive presence is truly tested. Most analytical professionals react to conflict in one of two ways. They either shut down and rely on logic or data to shield them, or they flame up and become defensive. The executive approach is the neutral frame. When someone challenges your data or your authority, don't lean in and don't talk faster. Instead, use the commanding pause. We discussed this earlier. Then use the inquiry pivot. Instead of telling the person they're wrong, say, "Help me understand the perspective you're bringing to that point." By asking them to explain, you take the control of the energy in a positive and proactive way. You're no longer on the defense. You're the one auditing the information. This keeps your warmth dial high enough to prevent a total breakdown, and your authority dial is at a 10. Influencing those above you requires a specific type of social grace. You can't demand respect from a superior. You demonstrate it through your understanding of their priorities. Most professionals approach their boss with problems. Executives approach their boss with symmetry. Symmetry means your goals and their goals are perfectly aligned. Before you enter a meeting with a senior stakeholder, ask yourself, what is the one thing they're most afraid of failing in this quarter? When you frame your updates, your requests, and even your social interactions around relieving that fear, you move from being an expense on their balance sheet to being an asset. High achievers like their work to speak for itself and often feel that self-promotion is low grade. And it is, if you do it wrong. The wrong way is to say, I did X. The executive way is to focus on the narrative of growth. Instead of saying, I closed that deal, you might say, the process we used to close that deal gave me some great insights on how we can scale our Q4 targets. I'd love to share the framework with you. You're still the hero of the story, but the story is about the value created for the firm, not just your ego. This is social leverage at its finest. You're making yourself visible while simultaneously proving your value as a leader who thinks about the bigger picture. Let's take a moment to look at your current social output. Are you controlling your physical and digital environment? Are you navigating meals and mixers with casual authority? Are you building a network of amplifiers by providing strategic recognition to others? Are you eliminating uptalk and the just tax from your executive communications? Now we're going to dive into the inner game. We're going to dismantle the imposter syndrome that keeps you from speaking up in those boardrooms, and we're going to build a mindset of unshakable worth. You have the skills, you have the protocol. Now we're going to build the psychological armor to make it permanent. Up to this point, we've been building your external shell, the way you speak, the way you sit, and how you navigate the high-stakes etiquette of power dinners and boardrooms. But here's the reality. You can have the perfect suit, the perfect framework, and the perfect commanding pause. But if the internal dialogue is screaming that you don't belong, the room will eventually feel that vibration. Analytical high achievers are uniquely prone to a specific type of social imposter syndrome because you're trained to be precise. You often feel that you aren't 100% certain that you shouldn't speak, and you wait for permission that never comes. You let less qualified, louder voices take the lead because you're busy double-checking the math in your head. Now, in this section, we're going to dismantle that internal tax. We're going to rebuild your inner game from the ground up and move from a mindset of subject matter expert to a leader in command of their zone. The reason you feel like an imposter isn't because you lack skill. It's because your standards are higher than everyone else's. You see the gaps in your knowledge that no one else can see. You're judging yourself against an ideal of perfection, while the rest of the world is just looking for direction. For the high achiever, imposter syndrome usually manifests as the preparation trap. You tell yourself, I'll speak up in the meeting once I've read one more report, or I'll network once I have the perfect elevator pitch. This is a sophisticated form of procrastination. It's a defense mechanism designed to keep you safe from the risk of being found out. But here's the truth of the executive world. Every CEO, every senior partner, every high-level litigator is navigating ambiguity. The difference between them and the under-leveraged professional is that they've accepted that certainty is a myth. You can only be 100% certain in hindsight, but conviction is a choice. One of the biggest psychological hurdles for the detail-oriented, overthinking, analytical mind is a transition from technical expert to strategic peer. When you're in expert mode, you feel your worth is tied to having the right answer. This creates a high-pressure environment where every question feels like an interrogation. When you're in a room with people who have more experience or higher titles, you might feel like you're subordinate to their status. This is nothing more than a failure of internal calibration. To fix this, adopt a functional peer mindset. Regardless of your title, you're in that room because you provide a function that they don't have. The CEO doesn't need you to be another CEO. They need you to be the strategist they can lean on. When you view yourself as a necessary component rather than a junior attendee, your nervous system settles down. You aren't there to pass a test. You're there to contribute to a mission. Worth isn't something you earn through a promotion or a degree. If you tie your worth to your achievements, you'll always be a slave to the next win. Unshakable worth comes from your identity. Too many professionals build their identity on performance. For example, I'm successful because I closed the deal. High-status leaders, on the other hand, build their identity on process. I'm successful because I'm the type of person who stays calm under pressure and makes the best possible decisions with the data available to me. When you shift your identity to your attributes rather than your outputs, your confidence becomes anti-fragile. Even if a project fails or a meeting goes poorly, your core identity remains intact. You didn't fail, you simply encountered a data point that requires a pivot. Do you wait to be asked for your opinion? Do you find yourself waiting for a lull in the conversation that never comes? In high-stakes environments, power is never given. It's assumed. The underleveraged professional waits for a formal invitation to lead, and the executive assumes the invitation was given the moment they were hired. This requires a mindset flip. Instead of asking, "Do I have permission to speak?" ask, "What's the cost to the organization if I remain silent?" When you reframe your participation as a responsibility to the firm rather than a risk to your ego, the fear of speaking up vanishes. You aren't interrupting, you're intervening on behalf of a big goal. The spotlight effect is a psychological phenomenon where we believe people are noticing our flaws and errors much more than they actually are. In reality, everyone's far too busy worrying about their own presence to scrutinize yours. If you stumble over a word or if your slide has a typo, the analytical brain enters a shame spiral. You think, now they know I'm not a pro. The executive mindset treats these as noise. You've acknowledged the noise, you don't apologize for it, and you move back to the signal. The more you obsess over a minor error, the more you signal to the room that your confidence is brittle. But if you move past it with grace, the room follows your lead. A major part of the inner game is your relationship with rejection. High achievers often have a low tolerance for no because they see it as a critique of their intelligence. To build unshakable worth, a rejection audit should be performed. Look back at the last 3 times an idea of yours was rejected or a social interaction felt off. Did the world end? Did you lose your technical ability, or did you simply learn that your delivery or timing needs a little calibration? High-level social skills are like a muscle. They require stress to grow, and if you aren't occasionally feeling a bit of social friction, you aren't playing full out. You should be seeking out high-status friction because it's the only way to calibrate your internal dial. Know that before you enter a high-stakes environment, your brain is already running simulations. Usually, the socially underleveraged brain is running disaster simulations. What if I forget my point? What if they ask a question I can't answer? You want to manually override these with authority simulations. Spend 3 minutes before a meeting visualizing yourself using the commanding pause. See yourself leaning back in the chair and owning your space and using the neutral frame during conflict. When you do this, you're preloading your nervous system. You're telling your body this environment is safe and that you're the one in control. By the time you walk through the door, your brain feels like it's already won the interaction. The inner critic of an analytical mind is usually a literalist. It says things like, "You don't have enough data to support that claim," or "You're being too loud." We're going to replace the literalist with a strategist. Instead of "I hope they like me," use "How can I provide the most value to this room right now?" Instead of "Don't mess this up," use "I'm here to ensure we reach the right decision." This shift from self-conscious to task-conscious is the ultimate secret of executive presence. When your focus is entirely on the objective, there's no room left for the ego to feel like an imposter. As you move into the next phase of this masterclass, I want you to sit with these 4 truths. You're not your output, you're the strategist who creates the output. Silence isn't safety, it's a social tax on your career. You don't need permission to lead, you only need a mission to serve. Your value in the room is not as an expert, but as a decision maker. Next, we're going to take this new unshakable mindset and apply it to the most difficult social challenge of all, influencing without authority.